Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed grateful to have the opportunity today to interact and to gather here and find information that may be beneficial to us as individuals or businesses, but certainly all of Onslow County needs to be aware of what goes on in the rest of the state. It is crucial to what we do here. And I'm very glad that you took this opportunity. If you have not silenced your phones, please do so. At this time, I'm going to introduce someone that needs no introduction. He's probably one of the best cheerleaders Onslow County has ever had in the state. So at this time, my friend, Senator Harry Brown, will come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Good to be here today, and I get the pleasure of introducing our speaker today, Drew Heath. Drew is, if I think I got this right, Drew, a Wilmington native, right down the street. But Drew, a few years ago, was selected by the governor to be the director of the Industrial Commission. And any of us that are in business understand how important that position is. And Drew went over there, and I thought did a great job of kind of redirecting that division, in my opinion, and really making it a division that was fair to both sides. And where before I think most of us on the business side didn't feel that way, but he did a great job over there and put some key people in place. And then when Lee Roberts decided to leave as the state budget director, the governor picks Drew to take that spot with about 2 to maybe 3 months to go before he had to produce a budget. So talking about throwing somebody in the fire, I think the governor really did that to Drew, because I think he shows up in February and he had to have a budget out by the end of April, 1st of May. And for somebody that works with those budgets, I know just how difficult that job was for Drew, but he did a great job. He produced a good budget for us to work with. Of course, this year, the budget went from the governor's office to the House and then to the Senate. And the budget that Drew put together really allowed us, I think, to build off of. And I think we produced one of the best budgets we have in a long time. So with that, Drew, I appreciate working with you and all the good work you're doing. And look forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Let me just say before I start, it's because of leaders like Senator Brown that our state is in such good shape today. Senator Brown does not need to be in the North Carolina Senate. He's got a successful business, he's got a family, grandkids, etc. So he's really a true public servant, and it's been a pleasure to work with him and his very professional staff as well. So thank you very much. Before I get started, I need to let everybody know that I'm here in my official capacity as the state budget director, not on behalf of any campaign or candidate. You will hear me talk a lot about the governor because I work for the governor, and we've done some great things. But none of this could have been accomplished without good support from Senator Brown and the other appropriations chairs, so they deserve as much or more credit. So anyway, that's the lawyer in me had to get that disclaimer out, so we can move past that. So before we really get into the budget, I wanted to give you all an update on the hurricane. So we're out of the danger zone in Onslow County, and we're getting to be out of the danger zone for pretty much every county. I don't think you're going to see the death toll rise anymore. At least that's what we pray. So we're going to transition into the recovery phase, and it's going to be a long-term recovery. These storms take years to dig out from, and so that's going to be something that's going to be reflected in the budget for years to come. It's going to have a significant price tag. If you think back to Hurricane Floyd, was upwards of $800 million in 1999 dollars. So if you time value money that to 2016. That's real money. So right now we're working, the state is working with FEMA to do preliminary damage assessments. We've already started that for Onslow County. Federal resources are deployed. We are, getting money out to people on an individual basis. Over 40,000 people have already applied. 36 counties have been granted emergency status. But we are in the best position we have ever been as a state because we prudently budgeted and invested record amounts of money into the rainy day fund. And not everybody supported that. And it should be credited to the leadership of Senator Brown and the governor and others to invest $470 million in an election year into the rainy day fund so that we would have money when we need it in times like this. So just an update there. We're going to talk about North Carolina's economy. We're going to talk about kind of putting it into context, where we were 3 years ago, where we are today, how we got to where we are today. We're going to talk about record revenue surpluses. We're going to talk about how we spent those surpluses. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Connect NC bond. So I didn't know much about North Carolina's economy. A lot of pride in the state and so forth, but I didn't know that we were really, truly a major world player. So $510 billion annual GDP places us right ahead of countries like Austria and Poland in terms of world economic powers. 23rd largest economy in the world, 9th largest in the United States. It's really staggering. Kind of a snapshot of where we were when Governor McCrory took office and where we are today. So 9.4% unemployment, some of the worst in the region. Today, 4.6% unemployment. All 100 counties in North Carolina have seen improvement in the unemployment figure. We had a $2.5 billion unemployment insurance debt to the federal government, and that costed employers, because they had to pay surcharges on that debt per employee while we carried it. So in a pretty short amount of time, we've paid off that debt to the federal government, and we actually have a reserve of about $2 billion now. And that'll save employers across the state about $700 million over time. Personal tax rate and corporate income tax rates have both declined pretty rapidly. So we went from 7.75% in the personal tax rate down to, I think it's at 5.8% now. It will go down again first of the year to 5.499. Corporate tax rate, same thing. It's been more than cut in half. 6.9% down to 3% beginning of January 2017. This resulted in tangible, real savings to North Carolina employers and individual tax filers. So about $4.7 billion worth of real tax cuts when we extend through this next biennium. I'm sorry, through the first year of the next biennium. $4.7 billion. We have earned some accolades for our rapid cuts to our taxes. So we were ranked 44th in the nation for business tax climate, and now we're down to 11th. When these new changes go into effect the first of the year, we anticipate that we would break the top 10. And that's significant because businesses from out of state are constantly looking. Our North Carolina businesses are looking for the best environments in which to expand, and that's true for businesses from out of state as well. And then when they see that we are so competitive with not only our tax climate, but with what we've done to do some good work in deregulation, we've cut almost 700 rules and regulations from our laws in the last 3 years. When they see that kind of activity, they know that we are a state that is truly open for business. And it's not in my materials, but there was a Dallas Business Journal article that cited some 5,000 plus businesses that were fleeing the state of California because of their hostility to business. And that was reflected in high taxes, high costs, and lots of regulation. And what was notable in that article is that a lot of those businesses came to North Carolina. We were like the third largest state in terms of the businesses that they outflowed to. And that is unusual because usually when businesses flee states, they go to the neighboring states. So if it was California, they might go to Oregon or Texas, states around that neighborhood. But those businesses are coming all the way across the country to expand in North Carolina, and they're doing that because of what we've done for business. We cut taxes so aggressively in North Carolina that the major media outlets were putting forth a sort of the sky is falling type narrative. They were estimating that tax revenues that we would be in the red by over $300 million, which is sizable for North Carolina. And to my predecessor's credit, Lee Roberts said, you know what, guys, just hang on. Let's wait until we get the end of the year data, and let's see what happens. By the time I became budget director in February, we are already projecting a $237 million revenue surplus. So that's quite a swing from a predicted $313 million shortfall. By the time the year-end numbers came in June, at the end of June, we were projecting a $430 million revenue surplus. So that's a huge swing. We got nationwide accolades for what we've done with our economy. And you'll have to excuse me, I'm suffering from a cold and I've got a little cough. Excuse me. We've been ranked #1 for business competitiveness by Site Selection Magazine, #2 best state for business by Forbes Magazine, #3 best state for business by CEO Magazine. We have the 4th fastest growing economy in the nation in GDP numbers, and we were up from #9 to #5 best state for business by CNBC. And then if you take the revenue incomes for the 20 largest states and took the average, this is according to Moody's Investor Services, North Carolina outpaced that average at a 2-to-1 ratio. That's year to date. So this just shows that the major media outlets and our naysayers were really wrong. Our revenues continue to climb really pretty dramatically. Even in an environment, so let that sink in, an environment where we have been cutting taxes at a record level, our tax revenues have gone up. And so what has caused that? North Carolina's economy has created more than 300,000 new jobs since 2013. That is staggering. To put that into context, that's like a job for every man, woman, and child in Jacksonville and Winston-Salem combined. That's a huge tax revenue base coming online in about 3.5 years, and that's incredible. Not only do we have more jobs, but our income is growing as well. So real median household income rose 9.9% in North Carolina. That's almost 10%. That is, you just don't hear about that very often, but that's staggering. Almost doubled the national average. Peeling the onion back a little bit, looking into some anecdotal figures. If you look at our tourism as an indicator of economic health and well-being in North Carolina, hotel occupancy rates in our major tourism hubs, Charlotte, Durham Performing Arts Center, Buncombe County, Asheville's a huge tourist destination, obviously. And then statewide, our numbers were up 7.7% on the year. So I think, #1, that speaks to the strength of our economy, but also it pushes back on this narrative that you might have heard that recent controversial legislation has meant that no one wants to come to North Carolina. That's not the case, and the numbers support the fact that people continue to come and spend their money in North Carolina. Right here in Onslow County, if we look at some local numbers, unemployment in January was 9.5%. Today it's 5.4%. That's a pretty healthy cut to the local unemployment rate. We've had some investments. Somebody might have had a hand in that in our last budget. So $5 million career and technical education school renovation for retrofits. The Montford Point Marine Memorial, I believe you had an event there not too long ago, $330,000 for that. And we've had some good jobs announcements the last few years as well. So Armstrong Marine, $8.4 million investment in 200 new jobs. And then the downtown revitalization grant in this last budget, $94,000. So shifting now, sort of, the economy is doing very well in North Carolina. We had some revenue surpluses. Now we want to talk about where we spent the taxpayer money in this last budget. And again, this is not something that I really paid attention to until I came to this role, and I thought I'd share it with you. Look at where we spend our money as a state. We spend our money in education. Almost 60% of our total budget goes to K-12, community college, and university system. Billions and billions of dollars. Second biggest category is health and human services, paying for medical care primarily for those who can't care for themselves. It's the Medicaid budget drives that. And then justice and public safety, keeping our streets safe and bringing justice to those who have interaction with our justice system. Let me go back, actually. We really try in North Carolina not to have wasteful spending. These big spending categories, education and DHHS, are really driven by enrollment. So if the people are there, they're going to get the service. When you think of all the other stuff that you think of about state government, fits into this orange sliver, about 2%. So we really do try to be lean. We try to be mindful of how we're spending taxpayer dollars and really be prudent. In this last budget, there were 4 major spending areas. It was really a focused and targeted expansion budget. The first was fiscal responsibility. Second was education, teacher pay to $50K, and college affordability. We got a nice middle-class tax cut in there, and then some mental health and substance use spending. So first of all, with fiscal integrity, as I mentioned, the $1.6 billion savings reserve fund that we now have, we invested $473 million into that fund in an election year. The budget was balanced. We do not have recurring expenses that are paid for by one-time money. So it's a very balanced, very conservative budget. And not only is it a good idea to have rainy day funds for economic or natural disasters like Hurricane Matthew, but when we went to do the inaugural sale of the $2 billion Connect NC bond, the Debt Affordability Advisory Committee based our ability to afford the bond obligations based on a 3.5% interest rate. My office and the Treasurer's office presented North Carolina's economy to the 3 major credit rating agencies, Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's, and they report on our economic health. And all 3 of the reports mentioned our prudent budgeting practices and the size of our rainy day fund in giving us unanimous AAA credit ratings. And we were able to obtain a 2.079 total interest cost. So when you're talking about $200 million, getting a 1.5% discount essentially on your interest rate is real money. And so it actually saved our state money by having prudent investments in our budget. Second area of focus for the budget was education. So for the first time in state history, teachers in North Carolina will get an average salary of $50,000 per year. I was very proud that we focused on this. My mother is a retired school teacher, public school teacher. My sister and her husband are both public school teachers. I know the struggles that they have. And this huge investment, this last budget, builds on more than $1 billion that we invested in teacher pay since 2013. That's not the only thing we did for education, though. We also tried to tackle this national issue of college affordability and student loan debt. And a couple of different things we did there. So first off, this fall, for entering freshmen at the UNC system institutions, tuition will be frozen. So if you graduate on time, if it's a 4-year degree, that means 4 years. If it's a 5-year degree, that's 5 years. Your tuition will remain static over that period of time. If you don't graduate on time, then you get put back into the escalation cycle. And so what it does is there's a planning element to it for families, and there's an affordability element, but it also incentivizes people to graduate on time. Second thing we did is we capped the fee increases for the schools at 3% year over year so that the schools couldn't make up those costs by just increasing fees for students. And then finally, for 3 of the university system schools, UNC Pembroke, Elizabeth City State University, and Western Carolina University, we're offering $500 per semester in-state tuition, which is an incredible bargain for those schools. If you think about it, $500 per semester is just really an amazing value. The next area is a middle-class tax cut. So in North Carolina, you don't pay income taxes right now or before this budget on the first $15,500 that you earn. When this is implemented, you will not pay taxes on the first $17,500 that you earn. With this change, 75,000 tax filers are estimated to drop off the rolls completely in terms of personal income. So this disproportionately benefits those who are lower income earners. And it was very important to the governor and to the General Assembly to make sure that we continued cutting taxes and that we cut taxes in a manner that would benefit the low income taxpayers. And then finally, we did some limited expansion in the health services area. We did not, as a state, choose to enter into the exchanges, as some states have done, and expand Medicaid consistent with Obamacare. Instead, what we did was some targeted expansion, and the governor formed the Mental Health and Substance Use Task Force. They came out with their recommendations during the budget development cycle, and we funded about $20 million worth of their recommendations. What that included was case management systems so that people don't, fall through the cracks, opioid and prescription drug treatment. There is a nationwide opioid epidemic between prescription painkillers and heroin that is really plaguing every county in the state, including this county. And so one of the things that we did was a bill was passed to open up access to a drug called naloxone, which is a life-saving drug that counteracts the effects of an acute opioid-induced overdose. We also wanted to expand drug and veteran treatment courts so that folks suffering from PTSD and from substance use issues could get treatment and become productive citizens rather than wasting away in our jails. And then finally, we wanted to open up some housing opportunities between transitional housing and emergency housing. And finally, a Raleigh issue that we kind of spread around statewide was the sale of Dorothea Dix property. The old Dorothea Dix Mental Hospital that was located in Raleigh was sold, and the proceeds of that are going to be used to open up mental health beds. Also, the new Cherry Hospital in Goldsboro is going to have about 315 psychiatric beds. So really moving forward on our commitment to try to treat mental health and substance use issues. Okay, now we're going to transition into the Connect NC bond. So this was the $2 billion bond initiative that will have investments in, I believe, about 70 of our 100 counties. It'll affect every region of the state. And the focus, as you can see, is on colleges and universities. About $1.3 billion is going to go there. Almost $1 billion of that will go into the university system. And the commitment is to the STEM areas, so science, technology, engineering, medicine. And that's because we think that's the way that our economy is moving. So we want to train our workforce to be ready to meet the needs of the business demands. Some money into state parks, some badly needed water and sewer infrastructure investments, and then the National Guard and public safety. So a lot of our National Guard armories were so old that the service bays that they had there could not accommodate the vehicles that we now use because the vehicles are so much bigger than they used to be. Just little things like that nobody had really thought of over the past few years and decades. And then agriculture, huge segment of our economy, and we wanted to invest in some agricultural research facilities. We touched on the bond rating. I don't think we need to really go over that or belabor that, but that was very instrumental in securing a low interest rate for the inaugural sale of North Carolina general obligation bonds. This is a graphical representation of where the projects are. As you can see, it truly is a statewide bond initiative that benefits all regions of the state. And we'll dive into a couple of projects that are right here in the Onslow County area. So Coastal Carolina Community College will stand to receive about $6.9 million, and then Hammocks Beach State Park will get a little bit over $1 million. This is how the bond is anticipated to play out. So the Council of State in this first year authorized $200 million to be sold. A lot of that is going to be spent on design and planning for projects that are all over the state. And then you'll see in years 2, 3, and 4, spending will really ramp up. So this design and planning in this first year will really drive the construction projects in years 2, 3, and 4, and then it'll fall off a little bit. And that tracks very similar to some other historical big bond projects. That's really the end of my presentation. I hope that there are some questions that I can try to answer. I want to thank Senator Brown again. I don't see Representative Cleveland or Millis or Shepard, but they're good partners as well. So with that, are there any questions? I hope that there are. Sure. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry.
Would you repeat the question?
Yes.
And then we'll have a microphone if you'll allow us to get to you.
The question was, how many drug treatment courts do we currently have? And I don't know the answer to that.
There is very few. I know Onslow County has been working on one, and we will probably have one sometime next year.
This is really
Veterans Court, anyway.
Gotcha. And it's an old problem that is finally getting some attention. So these are sort of the first steps in trying to address a lot of these questions, a lot of these issues. Yes, sir.
Public safety. I can do that. We see at the ground level a direct impact between public safety, quality of life, and economic success. Do you see the same thing up in Raleigh?
Absolutely. I don't know that I can cite any studies, but direct correlation between if your city is safe and opportunities for economic expansion. I mean, people don't want to move to your city or stay in your city if they're worried about their safety. And we see it all over the state. Yep.
Can we talk about the budget process? I don't know that you understand exactly how that process.
Well, really, it's Senator Brown and I get together over lunch one day and just kind of hash it out. But so the governor introduces a proposed budget, and then in alternating years, either the Senate or the House kind of goes next, and they introduce their proposed budget, and then the other chamber introduces theirs, and then a conference committee is formed, and the General Assembly kind of gets on the same page, and they pass a budget, and then the governor signs it. I can't think of a time where the governor vetoed the budget. Certainly McCrory hasn't. I don't know if you know of any other times. But kind of stepping back from that very high-level process, at least from OSBM, which is the governor's budget office, the process is like the Golden Gate Bridge. So as soon as you get done painting it, it's time to start painting it again. So I think we got this passed early July, or at least it came out of the General Assembly early July, and in August, the budget office issued their instructions memo to the state agencies, telling the state agencies what information we need to start putting the budget together. So, there's a dozen or so cabinet agencies that the governor sort of has direct control over, and then there's the Council of State, which is agriculture, and the lieutenant governor and the auditor and secretary of state and Department of Labor, and so on. And they all meet with the budget office, and we go through what sort of systemic holes that they have in their budgets and where they would like to expand. And we compile this huge document, and it just goes through kind of an iterative process of change for several months, culminating in the governor signing off on it, and then we have a joint press conference, and then the General Assembly kind of picks up and runs with it. But they have an office that sort of mirrors mine, the Fiscal Research Division, who is full of very talented economists and forecasters and agency experts and so on. I've got about 60 employees in the budget office, and we have the same sort of staff. And I'm kind of rambling here, but there's the spending side, and then there's the revenue side as well. And so it's very important for the General Assembly and the governor's office to be on the same side in terms of on the same page on the spending side. So what we do is our staff forecasts what we think revenue is going to be, and General Assembly's staff forecasts what they think it's going to be, and we come up with a consensus revenue forecast. And that's really the underpinnings for then the spending side of it. So sorry for the long-winded response.
Just real quick, is there a targeted amount on the unemployment fund that we've built up the safety net for? And if so, with job growth and everything, will there be some relief seen in the unemployment tax rates? Or is that?
I don't know that. I'm not aware of discussions about lowering the unemployment withholdings tax, if that's what you're asking about. Senator Brown may be more privy to that. And I don't know that there's a whole lot of desire to add to the $2 billion either. I think that's a problem that's in large part been addressed, and we're able to then move on to other areas to shore up reserves. Is that so?
I think $2 billion was a kind of a target for us. So the amount businesses pay will be based off of that. So you'll probably see some type of target number now. I can't let him off this piece.
Anthony, did you have transportation fund?
Oh boy.
Put me on the spot. Drew, just from a transportation perspective, can you tell me a little bit about how the governor's office interacts with the Department of Transportation in forming their budget? Because what we saw here on the screen was essentially the general fund, right? Mm-hmm. And by and large, the transportation funding comes out of either the Highway Trust Fund or other sources. So can you talk a little bit about the interaction there and maybe how that also proceeds through the General Assembly for ratification?
So I know there's sort of a history there with transportation funding, and I might defer to you, Senator, a little bit, but there, the Secretary of DOT works very closely with the governor. Except for I-77, he went off on his own on that one. I'm just kidding. But there were some systemic problems, some historical raids of either the highway fund or the trust fund that went to pay for other things in the state, in the general fund. And we've put a stop to that. We've also put a stop to politics in the transportation funding equation as much as we can with STI. So, huge component of the DOT budget is federal funding. And if you want to add anything to that.
Well, transportation, the two revenue sources really are taxes on automobiles and gasoline taxes. Then you got registration, title fees, those type fees, a little bit. The key to this past budget, there was a little over $200 million that was being transferred out of the transportation fund to the general fund that had been in place for many years. And that's the fund that everybody talked about for ever, it seemed like, about getting rid of the transfer, and we finally did that this year. And we were also able to, be quite frank, add a few fee increases that had been raised in about 20 years on title fees, like going from $10 to $12, but there's millions of those. And then on registration fees, again, a $2 or $3 increase that have been raised in over 20 years. So those small increases, because there's such a large volume of it, generated quite a bit of money. So overall, it generated about $350 million more to go to transportation than what we previously had. And that's ongoing dollars every single year. So it really spurred some growth as far as transportation projects go, because it was just an overnight infusion of $350 million a year to go to transportation. And so it really moved a lot of projects forward, and we should benefit here on several projects that I know many of you are aware of. But it happens, it's going to happen across the state, because honestly, you can't spend so much more money because you just don't have the capacity to spend so much at a time. So that will make a huge difference on the transportation side. But again, you know, that's how prudent I think we were in our budget. That was another 200-some million that came out of the general fund. It's no longer there, that we had balanced our budget with before. But because of our surpluses, we were able to do that and continue to fund, the key pieces that we had to fund. The other key piece, Drew, was the Medicaid piece. 6 years ago, we were spending about $1.8 billion in Medicaid. Today, it's almost $4 billion. So $2.2 billion more in Medicaid over the past 6 years. So you can see how Medicaid has driven the budget process in the past 6 years or so. Even though we've gone from a little under $19 billion to almost $23 billion, $2.2 billion of that's been Medicaid. So it's really tied our hands on doing some other things we'd like to do. But education's been a priority. We put most of it in education.
Yes, sir.
Real quick, Senator. I'm sorry, Senator. Senator, just to clarify a point on Medicare. My name is Frank Claiborne. The demographic shifts that are taking place in our population right now, a lot of baby boomers, I think 10,000 a day are turning 65. And we're talking $2.3 billion right now that are being set aside for that. I can see that increasing dramatically. Are we prepared to deal with that in the future?
That's Medicare. I think Medicare is a federal program.
Yes, sir.
It's solely a federal program. Medicaid, the state pays about a third of that cost. Medicaid is what I was referring to, going up about $2.2 billion.
That will also be increased because of the people who can't afford to get on that. I mean, is the state prepared to deal with that situation?
We really have. Before, there was not enough money being put away for Medicaid. I think that's for sure. And we faced that shortfall. We had to put about $700 million just to kind of catch up Medicaid a few years ago. Now we've had a little surplus in Medicaid where we've been able to budget it and manage it because we finally caught it up to where we can, again, manage it better than what it was before.
And I would just add to that, medical costs are going to increase. That's just the trend. But in addition to the rainy day fund, we have other reserves, one of which is the Medicaid risk reserve. So and we as a state have gotten better over the last few years at forecasting our Medicaid spending. But if we're off, we've got a pretty sizable reserve in the Medicaid risk reserve to deal with just that issue, to recalibrate for the next year. And then, the senator talked a little bit about some DMV fee increases that we've had. I failed to mention in my presentation that we are a growing state. So we average population growth of about 280 people a day in North Carolina. Our GDP is the fourth fastest growing in the nation. So with all that growth, our state budget is going to grow as well. What we did a good job doing was having very measured and responsible growth. So our overall state budget grew at about 2.8%, and recurring dollars was 2.3%. So every agency's budget, I think, on net increased in this last budget cycle. So claims of reduction to various types of spending are just not supported by the numbers. So, with all this population growth, it taxes the roads and the infrastructure, and at times you're going to have some fee increases like Senator Brown talked about.
Well, thank you all for taking your time today. Director Heath, I would like to introduce you to a few people in the audience that are our elected officials. Of course, you know Senator Brown. Also with us today, Commissioners Chairman Barbara Eichner, Vice Chairman Paul Buchanan, Commissioner Millionaire Williams, Commissioner W.C. Jarman from the Onslow County Board of Commissioners. We also have Mayor Anita Dingler from Holly Ridge. Thank you, Mayor, for coming as well. Sheriff Hans Miller, just behind you to your right. And also from the Board of Education members Earl Taylor and Bob Williams. So thank you all for coming. And I can't help, since I glanced toward Mr. Williams, that the best community college president in the universe is here as well, Dr. Ron Lingle. Not yet, but shortly. Those of you that know me and have seen some of my State of Community addresses or budget addresses, you have to know that I was sitting back there just kind of quivering with happiness over some of the slides that Director Heath has shown. Director, you are in a county with one of the best fiscal practices in the state. We're the 11th largest county in the state, 49th lowest property tax rate. Over the last 7 years, we've built more county infrastructure than ever before while maintaining a AA bond rating, and at one point in time, lowering property taxes after the overwhelming passage of a sales tax. We've been increasing in our schools by 300 to 400 students a year. Every 2 years, that's another school. We're at a locked-in per pupil appropriation through a public education funding formula. And basically, we've also set aside $5 million in a rainy day fund of our own and have just gotten a 2.56% interest on the most recent borrowing that we did. So I couldn't get your 2.0, but 2.56 is not bad. We really do appreciate the climate that's been created in North Carolina. Onslow County has prospered, and the entire state has prospered. Last week, I was in Raleigh for a few days, and while there, I had occasion to speak to a college roommate of mine from Campbell University. And he's a Virginian, works for the Virginia Supreme Court. And he and I were having a discussion about economic recovery and the fact that Virginia has a tremendous deficit, and I almost said Onslow County. North Carolina is posting a surplus, and it's only through the diligent efforts of individuals like Director Heath and others like Senator Brown, both of which I might add also have a Campbell University tie, that we've been able. I'm not saying it's Campbell, but I know you were just a professor there and you went to that other school, but you got there as quickly as you could. We are all benefiting from the very wise decisions that have been made in Raleigh. And there have been a few firsts recently. During the hurricane, Chairman and I both received our first call directly from a governor checking on our county to see how we were doing. Do we need any resources? And for the first time, we've had a director of the state budget come in and give us information directly. Director Heath's job is not an easy one. I've been involved in 23 local budgets, 10 of which I've been the budget officer for. We have a $209 million budget. They have a bazillion-dollar budget, okay? It's just a lot of money. But there are some things that are similar. You always will have a presentation of greater needs than you have resources. I thought it was ironic that you lifted one of my slides from my budget presentation, where we spend our most money on education, followed by human services, followed by public safety. You know, whether it was the town of Holly Ridge with a population of 700, or Onslow County with a population of over 200,000, or the state of North Carolina, a lot of the challenges are the same. And a lot has to be said for this man and his 60 employees to put together a budget for a state whose economy is larger than many foreign nations. So I think this has been one of the most informative and exciting sessions I've had in a very long time. And I do want to thank you all for your attendance today. Can we please give the director one more round of applause? Thank you.